What's up, ladies and gentlemen? So a few weeks ago, someone sent me an article that was written by the Smithsonian about how at one point telling ghost stories was much more associated with Christmas than with Halloween, because at one point most Americans didn't celebrate Halloween. So to get into the holiday spirit, I thought I would tell the story of the Wizard Clipp, the West Virginia ghost story that's been reviewed by the Vatican. So there are several tellings of this ghost story. There is a telling of it in Ruth and Musick's Telltale Lilac bush, which is more of the oral tradition, more of the West Virginian telling of the story. And in Gooley's The Big Book of West Virginia Ghost Stories. That's more of a historical and the Catholic telling of the story. I am going to go with this version of the story. The story starts out in 1790 something in what was then known as Smithfield, now known as Middleway. It's over in the eastern panhandle around the Martinsburg, Shepherdstown, Inwood. There's another town over there I'm trying to think of. Charlestown. That area over in the eastern panhandle, just west of Harper's Ferry. But being that it was in the 1790s, things were a little bit different. The United States was barely 20 years old, not even old enough to drink yet. The War of 1812 hadn't happened yet, so the original White House was standing because the Canadians hadn't come down and burn it down yet. And probably the only one relevant to this story is West Virginia wasn't a state yet. So at the heart of the story is Adam Livingston. Livingston moved to Middleway from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He had been an outstanding citizen of Lancaster. When he moved to Middleway, he quickly became a prominent and well-liked citizen there as well. He was so liked that when people traveled through the area, very commonly they would stay at the Livingston residence. One night, a traveling merchant stopped at the Livingston household, and I'll just stop right there because if you've ever read any West Virginia folklore or ghost stories, things don't usually turn out too well for traveling merchants. They're usually robbed, murdered, chased by ghosts, chased by cryptids, or in this case, fall horribly ill. This guy was very sick. He knew his time was coming, so he called Livingston to his room and begged for him to go out and find a priest so that he could receive his last rites and blessings. Livingston was a devout Lutheran. He wasn't a big fan of Catholicism. And at one point, he had gone as far as saying that basically anyone was welcome in his house except for priests. He would not let them through his door. So he kind of started shuffling his feet and was like, look, it's late. I'm tired. I don't even know where to find a priest. You know what? Maybe if I'm not as tired in the morning, I'll go out and look for one. But this is predominantly a Protestant community. And you know what? You might not even die. And then the next day, the guy died. So that was awkward. Not just did he die, but Livingston didn't know where he was coming from, where he was going, what his name was, if he had any heirs. Guy was dead. Livingston paid someone to stay up that night with the corpse, and I looked it up. I didn't know if that was some type of tradition at the time. I looked up Staying Awake with a Corpse. And besides being a really good middle album name, that is a tradition. In fact, what we know as a visitation or a wake comes from this tradition of staying up, making sure nothing happened or no one stole the body of an individual before they get a proper burial. Probably 99% of people knew that. I didn't. That's when the weird stuff started happening. So that very night, they paid someone to stay up with the body, and they couldn't keep candles lit in the room. They kept going out. After the third or fourth time of relighting them, the guy got Livingston to bring some candles. Almost as soon as they brought the candles into the room that had been lit the whole night, they went out. So the next day, they gave this traveling merchant a proper burial, and weird stuff started happening. Weirder stuff started happening. The noise that sounded like horses and carriages just galloping around the house, even though nothing could be seen. Pottery and like ceramic ware started breaking and being thrown all over the place. Fiery logs started just rolling out of the fireplace, which on a couple occasions started lighting other stuff on fire. A barn burnt down. Most of Livingston's cattle died in the fire. Money started disappearing. Oh yeah, and then came the clipping. That's where this story gets its name. It started sounding like there was just a giant set of shears constantly being clipped. So even though they could never find the source of the clipping, what they did find were blankets, curtains, rugs, saddles, and boots, all cut into either ribbons, strips, crescent moon shapes, or just other weird shapes. They don't go into detail about what these shapes were. There's a part of me that likes to think that, Livingston went to pick up a blanket one day, and as soon as he picked it up, little parts of it fell off. And then as he went to unfold it, it was just one of those, when you cut a piece of paper into, the shape of a person, you unfold it, and it's just an accordion of, dozens of people holding hands. Yeah. Probably didn't happen. I like to think it happened. Now, on top of these things being cut up, he also had chickens, turkeys, and some other livestock that were just being decapitated. Livingston was really beside himself at this point, and he kind of started becoming a little bit of a tourist attraction. People were showing up to witness these weird goings-ons. A group of young men came up from Winchester, Virginia, to face down the devil himself, and whenever they got comfortable in their room for the night, a rock came flying down the fireplace and chased them around the room until they left. On another occasion, a woman showed up. She had a prized silk hat, and she took the hat, she folded it up in a piece of burlap, and stuck it in her pocket. After being in the Livingston household for a little bit of time, she left. She took the burlap out of her pocket. Seeing it was undamaged, she thought she evaded the clipping. And then whenever she unfolded the burlap, her silk cap had just been sliced into ribbons. Livingston was completely beside himself. He wasn't sleeping. And whenever he was sleeping, he would get these weird dreams and visions. And one night he had a dream that he was climbing up a mountain, and at the top of this mountain was this huge, beautiful church, and an individual wearing robes, and a voice proclaimed to him that this is the individual that can rid you of all this crazy, crazy shenanigans. So he woke up that night and he told his wife, I'm going to go find this robed man, and I'm going to put an end to all of this. So he went out looking for this robed individual, and in Shepherdstown he found a priest named Coheel that he swore was the exact man from his vision. So he begged Coheel to come, rid him of this evil, and Coheel just laughed at him. Told him that he needed to be more weary of his neighbors, that it was just them playing weird pranks on him, and probably just a streak of bad luck. But he kept persisting and pestering this priest on until finally the priest did come to his house and blessed it, threw some holy water around, and almost immediately there was a sound of horses galloping around his house. And when that sound dissipated, there was a sum of money that had disappeared that magically just reappeared on the doorstep. In order to show his gratitude to this priest for helping him, he did leave a chunk of land, 30-some acres, to the Catholic Church whenever he did finally return to Pennsylvania. And after his house received this blessing, there were no more paranormal encounters. And that is the Ruth and Musick explanation of the Wizard Clipp. The other version of the story is much more weird. Where the Ruth and Musick story ends, the traditional Catholic version of the story goes way further. It claims that there was a voice that started plaguing Livingston, trying to get him to do this whole list of things that he needed Livingston to do for him so that he could get out of purgatory. The reason why this ghost story has been reviewed by the Catholic Church, number one, Livingston did actually grant a fair amount of land to the Catholic Church. To this day, the area is known as Priest's Field, and there is a memorial to both Livingston and one to the unknown stranger, which, depending on which version of the story you're reading, it's either the peddler that never got proper blessing, or it's this random dude that Livingston had to dig up for a disembodied voice. Now, one of the individuals that documented the Wizard Clipp at this time was a priest named Gallitzin, who did a lot of works, but he was known as the Apostle of the Alleghenies. And one of his many lines of works was he came and held a mass at the Livingston household and may or may not have done an exorcism. He did a lot of documentation on the Wizard Clipp, and he has also been considered a servant of God, which is on the spectrum of sainthood. Like, he's not a saint, but they have his application and they're reviewing it. And in order to ascend to a saint, the Vatican has to review his entire body of works, one of which is his work with the Wizard Clipp haunting. So, in a roundabout way, the Vatican has at least reviewed the events of the Wizard Clipp. Really great story, really weird story. There are like 8 different versions of the story. There's versions of the story where Livingston on his deathbed demands to see a priest, but because of a storm or something, none are able to find him, so he's never able to get his last rites and final blessings. And there's just a ton of different stories. It's at its roots, it's basically a story of a guy that gave a chunk of land to the Catholic Church. That part of it is very well documented. Even to this day, that point is very well documented. In fact, up into like the 20th century, early 20th century, the Livingston family was actually trying to get this chunk of land back from the Catholic Church. That's the story of the Wizard Clipp. Have a good holiday, everyone. I don't know what holidays you celebrate. You know what holidays you celebrate, so have a good one of those, and have a good rest of your 2019. And don't forget to stay wild, stay wonderful, stay weird, and I'll talk to you later.